Commissioner, give me your name and spell it for me, please.
Scott Haggerty, H-A-G-G-E-R-T-Y.
And your title?
I'm an Alameda County Supervisor.
And what are your titles in respect to your positions both in ABAG and MTC?
I am currently serving as the chair of MTC, and I'm a past president of ABAG.
All right. So tell me, as the two agencies celebrate their 40th and 50th anniversaries, one of their shared goals, well, their shared goal is regionalism. How important is regionalism in the Bay Area?
You know, what's really funny is I think if you would have asked that question of me 14 years ago when I first got elected, I'd have a very different view of how I felt about regionalism. And when I talk regionalism, I even talk about it on the national basis. 14 years ago, I was running for election and supervisor. And I constantly told my constituents that, you know, I represent certain cities, and that will be my focus. That's all I want to do. I don't want to sit on these other regional boards because I view them as a waste of time. I was in office probably about 3 months before I realized that view was a detriment to the people that I was going to represent. Meaning that if I did not get out on a regional basis and did not get recognized, my district would be left behind. Be left behind in planning for housing, be left behind in transportation dollars. My district was affected by air quality, things that were happening in other parts of the region that was settling the air that was settling the basin in the Tri-Valley. So I realized very quickly that if I was going to serve my constituents, I didn't really need to be in the district. I needed to be at the regional agencies. So my answer is very different today than it was 14 years ago. I learned a lot, and I'll never forget, I was at a regional board, and Elihu Harris was mayor of Oakland at the time. And he went to this, it was a committee meeting, and actually decided, or he didn't decide, but I thought what he was a bold move, is he was giving up transportation dollars for the good of the committee. And I thought, wow, that was very, very interesting that he did that. Later on that day, I went to another transportation committee in which he was fully funding his project. So what I learned is that not only if you wanted to be effective, did you have to sit on one regional board, but if you were going to keep an eye on everybody, you needed to be on all of them. So I think really to be on a regional board benefits your constituents at home. And because of that, I mean, I think because of MTC, serving as the chair, working with my fellow commissioners who really, the MTC Commission is a wonderful commission. We have been able to do over $1 billion in improvements in my district. Things that would not happen if I wasn't sitting at these regional committees, pushing to make sure that the voices of my constituents were heard. So it was an extremely valuable lesson for me to get out. And now, not only do I work, I had mentioned that the region is one thing, but then there's nationalism. And I recently served as the chairman of the Transportation Committee for the National Association of Counties. Again, where I had the ability to get out in front of Senator Boxer, testify in front of the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee on behalf of counties, on behalf of rural counties, suburban counties, urban counties, but to make sure that counties' voices were heard. And I really believe that is the role of the elected official. So I don't believe that anybody, any elected official, should ever discount the value of serving on ABAG or MTC or even the Air District. And then there's BCDC, which I have never served on, but you know, those are really the 4 core agencies here in the Bay Area that are making decisions that affect people's lives on a daily basis.
So what are some of the issues in the Bay Area that are best served by a regionalistic approach? Well,
I mean, today we celebrate the 50th anniversary of ABAG and the 40th anniversary of MTC. So, you know, you really need to answer those questions twofold. MTC and the fact that we have this 9 Bay Area County region puts us in a position, first of all, it's a very large region. It's a very powerful region. We have very powerful politicians on a local level We have very powerful politicians on a national level. But really to have one voice when talking about transportation and how we want to see the region and the transportation infrastructures investments be made, I think that to speak with one voice is of huge benefit. Because when we're looking at BART is a system that connects, counties. It connects communities. It connects urban cores. And so I think when we look at connectivities of BART, or if we look at addition of AC transit lines, for example, and unfortunately, these last few years where we've had to look at cuts because of the region. I think that MTC is extremely well respected in DC, and I think that when we go back and we speak with one voice, and if we don't kind of splinter off and we stay together, I think we accomplish the goals that we've set out for all 9 Bay Area counties. And having said that, then there's ABAG. And I think ABAG has a tough job because, ABAG in the past has come out with regional housing needs, and now we're looking at PDAs and SCSs and sustainable community strategies. It seems like ABAG always gets the unpleasant stuff that they have to deal with. But even though it's unpleasant, I think the staff works very hard to make sure that we at least explain ourselves when we're talking about housing needs. How much housing one community takes, that can be an argument. I think of the recent discussions that we've had with the urban cores, San Jose, Oakland, San Francisco, they're simply saying, look, we'll take the housing, we just need the money to go along to help us build the infrastructure. So, I think speaking with one voice on the MTC side, it helps us really put us in a position of transportation infrastructure investment, because sometimes other communities in other states can't agree. And when they can't agree, MTC, because we are speaking with one voice, is there to scoop their money out because of their inaction. We just saw that the state of California got more money for high-speed rail because communities couldn't agree. So I think that's certainly the value. With ABAG, a careful, thoughtful discussion on how we want to look 20 years from now, how we want to look for our kids and our grandkids, I think that's what's important. Because, we only get one shot at developing these communities, these 9 Bay Area counties. And if we blow it, it's going to hurt our children. So I think that, I think ABAG and certainly their planning staff and the leadership that they've had as executive directors, I think we've been very fortunate. And I think that as we do move forward to hold this issue of SB 375 and AB 32 and how we want these communities to look and we want them to be sustainable, even if you don't agree with climate change or global warming or whatever you want to call it, when you really get down to the intent of SB 375 and AB 32, it's really just doing the right thing for future generations. And that's why I think that I felt that it's something that I have to be involved in, because I do take it very seriously that I want to leave this place a better place for my children and their children. And without looking at sustainable community strategies and just continuing to grow the way we are, I don't think we'll achieve that goal. I think we have to look at ourselves and say, you know what, we thought we're the smartest people in the room, but guess what, we're not. We've made mistakes. And now we're going to go back and we're going to try to fix it and do things right. So I think that ABAG, again, like I said, ABAG always is in this situation where they're not dealing with the most popular issues. And you see it all the time when you go to city council meeting. If you want to dump on a regional agency, dump on ABAG.
So during your watch, what were some of the accomplishments, or how did you, what was your input or contributions in terms of the two agencies' priorities in terms of regionalism?
Well, I think certainly when I was president of ABAG was probably one of the times when I felt the most schizophrenic. I was also chairman of the Air District at the same time and found myself sending letters to myself, which was kind of interesting. But through working with with MTC anyways, I've been proud of a few things, I think. I think that had I not been at MTC, I don't think the Warm Springs extension would have happened for BART. I think that, you know, I was one of the people that was pushing to move forward to the Bay Bridge as we see it being built now. I'm particularly proud of that because I think we do live in a wonderful area, and I think that we deserve to have landmarks like we are building right now for MTC. You know, I've had the difficult parts of when I was president of ABAG, for example. ABAG was trying to get a merger bill through to merge MTC and ABAG. And it wasn't something that I necessarily agreed with, so that was difficult, and sometimes it was extremely contentious. What came out of that was the JPC, and I really think that the JPC is kind of becoming the epicenter for this whole sustainable community strategies, and as we move forward, that's really where the discussion is happening. There's a lot of people working together. The merger, I don't think was a good idea at the time, and I stand by the decision that I had then. But I think the formation of developing the JPC, which eventually morphed into something a little bit more, has been something that's been good to the region. And I think that clearly, you know, about a year ago, the light kind of went on for me that, well, the merger wasn't what I felt was what we need to do, but the JPC is working. And we're starting to have discussions that are meaningful, that really speak to the people that we represent. So I'm particularly proud of the JPC. You know, at MTC, we rolled out the Clipper card, and for whatever you can say about Clipper, I think it's been a success. There's always people that will take advantage of any situation, and those people are still out there with Clipper. But you know, the fact that people can get on a transit agency and transfer to another one and continue to use the same card, I think that's something that's a positive. We've seen this in other countries. The Oyster card, I've used it. It's effective. You know, but I don't think even Clipper's role starts there. At some point, we'll morph into parking for Clipper. And then, you know, I hope that someday somebody can pull into the Oakland Coliseum to a Raider game and use their Clipper card to park. I mean, that's kind of the direction I want to go. So I think there's clearly been a lot of great things that have come out of you know, me being involved. You know, we don't do this stuff alone, and I think that probably what any politician could say that sits in this chair is we've been blessed with good staff, and we've been blessed with good staff work. And quite frankly, I believe the staff at ABAG and MTC clearly have made us politicians look good. You know, one other thing that I think is important to the region is we're trying to develop this hot lane network. And the hot lanes, I think, not only will provide a much easier commute for the people that are commuting, it gives them options. You know, if they're going to be late to work, a single occupancy vehicle can hop into the hot lane. But you know, I think what's really happening here with MTC is we're struggling right now. Federal funds aren't as plentiful as they were. State funds are almost non-existent. And we're trying to figure out how we can be self-sustaining. 9 Berry counties, 7 of them have half-cent sales tax measures going to transportation projects. We have Regional Measure 1, Regional Measure 2, bridge toll money that's helping with transportation improvements to the bridges. And now we have the hot lane network. These dollars that are generated in the hot lane network will go back to transit, will help us continue to fund vital transportation needs in the 9 Berry counties. I've been proud of that because really the first hot lane network was unveiled in my district on Highway 680. It's performing to the levels we thought it would. Unfortunately, about the same time we opened the hot lane, we were in the throes of a recession that is seeing very high unemployment, 12% in Alameda County. So I think what I'm saying is we continue to be innovative on how we become less reliant on federal and state funds. We'll always need their help, but we have to keep looking at ways. So half-cent sales tax measures, hot lanes, regional measures, it's all parts of the puzzle It's all what puts everything together that says we want to continue to provide for transit in these 9 barrier counties, and I think that's what's important.
From your perspective, what are the best accomplishments out of ABAG's 50 years?
ABAG's 50 years, I think that ABAG has done a very good job of really creating the forum of discussion on how we kind of look to our partners down south and say, you know, we really don't want to be like them. We want to be different. We want to be the Bay Area. We don't want to be an LA, a Los Angeles. And I think that they've provided the forum of not only elected officials, but they've certainly reached out to the communities, all communities, which is tough. 101 cities, 9 Bay Area counties, and made sure that their voices are heard. I think that ABAG has done a lot. I mean, you look at the Bay Trail, what an incredible feat. Sewer Smart, ABAG Power. I mean, they're constantly looking for something new. It's an innovative organization, and quite frankly, they have to be innovative to survive. So I think ABAG has really stepped up at all levels to make sure that the dialogue happens on how these communities grow.
So the same question now about MTC's 40 years. What were some of the shining moments in those 40 years in your mind?
I think the great thing, let me tell you this. From the minute I became an elected official, my goal was to become chairman of MTC. And I think that the reason for that is MTC is recognized as a national leader as far as metropolitan planning. They are the best. And I think if you look back and you look at their executive directors, that explains to you why. And again, I talked in the past about the solid staff work that really comes out of both agencies. But I think that MTC continues to plan. I mean, if you look at the things that we have going on, BART, would BART have happened if MTC wasn't here? I kind of doubt that. The transit, the way that MTC goes back and speaks with one voice, you just have to visualize anything related to transportation would probably not be here if it wasn't for MTC. Every big ticket item, every small ticket item, whether it's a road that's connecting 2 highways of a community, or it's investing in Muni, their 3rd Street rail projects, the Trans-Bay Terminal. I mean, the New Bay Bridge. These are all things that would not happen if it was not for MTC.
How is MTC changing the region's landscape and steering people away from driving and onto public transit, walking, and bicycling?
Well, I think one of the things that MTC continues to strive for really gets back to one of the creations of one of their programs, TLC, Transportation for Livable Communities. We are constantly looking at ways that we can invest in communities that are not communities that force you to get in a car, but actually communities that allow you to walk or bike or look out for some other mode of transportation. And quite frankly, it leads me to an area that I'm particularly proud of, even though a lot of the grant money came out of the Air District, and that's the fact that we're now looking at bike sharing. Bikes that will be available where you can simply use your Clipper card and check that bike out, hopefully your Clipper card someday, but you can check that bike out and you ride it to another station or bring it back to that one. I think that we continue to look at ways that the automobile is less dependent in your everyday life, and that's by building better communities.
Where do you think the future of regionalism is headed?
I paused for a long time to answer that question, and the reason I pause is where regionalism is headed is extremely important. But unfortunately, I think the elected officials that people elect, whether it's a city council, county supervisor, or even your state offices, is vitally important. I don't think that For example, with the sustainable community strategies discussions that are going on right now, I don't think the average elected official, whether it be city or county, really knows that this is going on. And unfortunately, as elected officials, we constantly are trying to figure out how to get them engaged. You go to these meetings and you attend these meetings, and it seems like you always see the same people. You know, you always see Tom Bates. You always see Mark Green. You often see Gail Olkema, Susan Adams. These are people that are involved in the region. They understand how important it is. But it's a small percentage of the total elected officials. So you ask me, how do I think I see regionalism? I first would say that I think that more elected officials need to get involved and understand the importance of regionalism. And then once we can do that, I think first of all, we can build better communities. And more importantly, we speak with one voice. And when we speak with one voice and you go back to Washington, D.C., you don't confuse your Senate member or your congressional member. You know that the Bay Area has vetted this process and they've come to them and said, look, we need help with this. And I think that as we do that, we will be more successful. But again, I believe that, for example, with ABAG, who I've said in the past, gets a bad rap because they've developed the housing needs and none of the city council members like to be told what to do. If they don't like being told what to do, then they need to get involved. So how do I see regionalism in the future? I see that there has to be greater involvement, but I also see that it's going to be extremely important because it's probably where a lot of, well, that's probably where the difference can be made. Not silo, not a small community, not a small city. I mean, I have to be honest with you, a lot of times I look at these smaller cities and say, wouldn't we be better served if we took a couple of these smaller communities and made them one city? Less duplication, more services, more police and fire services. I think that regionalism is something that we need to continue to do. In Alameda County, we're doing that. You know, we've brought in several city fire departments, Newark being the most recent. We've had discussions with others. We understand the value of less bureaucracy and getting more services down to the people that we represent. So I hope that answered your question.
Isn't that trending a little bit? I don't.
Isn't that what?
Trending a little bit. Like, for instance, I thought I read not too long ago that some of those East Bay cities are starting to think about they don't want to be a city anymore, or there was some sort of talk about that, and that they wanted to unincorporate. Am
I haven't seen where any city has wanted to unincorporate. I do know that there was an instance when a past mayor suggested that a couple cities become one to LAFCO in Alameda County. That's a difficult discussion. But I do believe with some of these smaller cities, populations less than 20, 30,000, they should have that discussion, because paying one city manager and the bureaucracy that goes along with that, that says you put more firefighters on the street, more cops on the street, and really, when you get down to it, isn't that what we're supposed to be doing? So I think that we look and we say, we need to do a better job of working together. And I think that discussion's happening. I think it's happened on a regional level between ABAG and MTC, and also including the Air District in that. I think that's happening. But I also think now you're starting to see cities say, wait a minute, can this county fire, for example, give us a better service for the people that we represent for less dollars? Sometimes that answer is yes. And quite frankly, when you're responding to a heart attack or a stroke in somebody's house, when you come into that home, they don't stop and say, wait a minute, are you county fire or are you city fire? They're just happy you're there, and you're there to save somebody they love. So I think that regionalism becomes a much larger discussion in the future as dollars become more scarce. But I don't think anybody should kid themselves. These are hard discussions, but these are needed. When we talk about regionalism, I think one of the things that there is a role for the region, and I think one of the areas the region has to really come together is in the area of Homeland Security. We have a lot of targets here, and we need to make sure that these communities are safe and that in the event of a disaster, people can talk to each other. And I know that in the early UASI grants and Super UASI grants, ABAG was very involved in that. And I think that that's something that ABAG can be very proud of, that they saw early on the vulnerability of the communities that we live in and kind of the way things were going, and saying we can do a better job of protecting our constituents. So I think ABAG really was in on the early stages of that.